everyone. As you've just seen, we're recording tonight's session. So if other people end up wanting to ask us for a copy of the recording, hopefully all being well, we'll be able to provide it. My name is Gabby Crafty. I'm the president of UJEB, and I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet from wherever we are. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I ask you please to mute yourselves. I can see a couple people haven't yet done that. If you could please just put your videos on mute. And I ask also if you could leave your videos on. We would like to see your faces, please. So there's a Goldie needs to be muted. I can't mute Goldie. But we would love to see your faces if possible, to make this as interactive as possible. Allow me now to introduce our speaker tonight, Alan Schwartz AM. He is chairing the Jewish Education Foundation. Alan has worked really hard to wrap his head around the difficult concept of what Jewish education means and what it ought to be and how it could be better delivered in the state of Victoria. I also want to acknowledge and welcome Nechama Bendit, who has been assisting the Jewish Education Foundation. I welcome also the members of the board of UJEB, and I also want to thank them for being here tonight and for all the work that they do voluntarily for UJEB and for the community. Finally, just also want to acknowledge our wonderful operations director, Oren Smith. You'll see in the chat function down at the bottom of your screens, if you click on it, you can, where it says to colon, you can click on everyone, but there's a drop down and you can actually select, if you just want to post a comment that only comes through to me, please send it to either to Oren or to me. If you want the whole group to see your comments and questions, then click on everyone. But in terms of me being able to feed your questions through to Alan, please preferably select Oren. Before I hand over to Alan, I want to address some concerns that have been raised with me about tonight's session. It's been raised with me that there are concerns that UJEB is seeking to funnel kids at government schools into Jewish schools. And I want to be very clear about this. That's not what tonight's session is about, and it's not what UJEB is about. UJEB, as you know, serves those members of the community whose kids don't attend Jewish schools. Some attend government schools, some attend independent schools that are not Jewish schools. Whatever the reason is, it is not a matter of concern to UJEB. UJEB doesn't seek to funnel children into the Jewish schools. It doesn't seek to funnel children away from the Jewish schools. We work in partnership with many other organisations across the Jewish community for the betterment of the community. We're proud of our students and we're proud of what we offer them, and we are always striving to become stronger and to deliver ever improved services. There is no Jewish community without a strong UJEB, and that is paramount in my mind and paramount in the mind of the board of UJEB. And tonight what you're going to hear about is an initiative that will be of interest to some UJEB parents. It is, it really is there as an information session for those parents. So with that, I hand over to Alan, and I look forward to moderating your questions after Alan has presented to you.
Thank you, Gabby, and hi everyone. I can see quite a few of you, and it's good to see a good attendance here tonight. I really appreciate it. So the Jewish Schools Project working group started only in hindsight as a very narrow project, and that was to think about the challenges facing the Jewish schools. We put together a working group of people who are concerned about fees and inaccessibility of fees, and we produced, as many of you would know, a report in about August last year which canvassed 4 options for the community. One was the status quo, do nothing. The second one was merger between various of the schools. The third was to create a brand new VCE school, a new and independent school for years 10, 11 and 12, whereby the 4 schools that we were studying would exit, if you like, the VCE business and really just focus on junior schools, and we create a brand new, say, David Ben-Gurion VCE school for the whole community. And the fourth option was to establish a fee assessment board to solve a number of problems that a number of parents had told us about, the difficulties they had in dealing directly with the schools and the schools having with parents applying for subsidies and assistance. And we thought that if we created an independent fee assessment board, which was based, where the assessments were based on objective capacity to pay, where it was highly confidential, et cetera, would have appeal. The response we got, which was, we got Monash University to do an analysis of the response. We had over 1,000 people attend sessions and 1,400 people join a Facebook group, et cetera, et cetera. It was a huge conversation, and we got effectively 2 main outcomes of the report. The first one was that the Jewish Schools Working Group was too narrow for the community, that really we should be focused on Jewish education and not Jewish schools. And we reflected on that and accepted that immediately as a real shortcoming. And when we looked at the members of the Jewish Schools Project, they're all very much associated with the schools. So as you would know, one of the things we've done is we've incorporated, we've transitioned the Jewish Schools Project, which was a self-appointed group of people concerned about Jewish schools, to create the Jewish Education Foundation, which is a charity limited by guarantee. I'm going to share a screen with you, and the other main outcome was that everyone, or a very large majority, felt that status quo was not sustainable. Despite that, most felt that mergers were neither desirable nor possible. Not desirable because it would reduce choice, and not possible because there were too many vested interests in the schools to create that outcome. There was a lot of attraction to the VCE school, but there was also concern about what it would do to the junior schools. And there was an overwhelming consensus that a fee assessment board, which all the schools supported, would be a very attractive addition to the education system here in Victoria. So that's the background, and I'm now going to share a screen. I'm not going to take a lot of time, but I do want to just take you through a PowerPoint presentation very briefly, and to talk you through the fee assessment board. So just to finish that thought about the broadening of the mandate, which Gabby spoke about, we've asked Gabby to join the board of the Jewish Education Foundation, and I have personally made a commitment to her that we will, in our next meeting, start thinking about the next stage of our project, which is asking the broader question of what can we do for Jewish education more broadly in the state of Victoria, not just for Jewish schools. So can you see that? Can you see that slide? Okay, thank you. So this was, the original was rethinking the future of our Jewish schools. And as you'll see, we are going to move towards rethinking the future of Jewish education in Victoria. We established the new entity as the Jewish Education Foundation, and the purpose of the Jewish Education Foundation is to advance Jewish education in Victoria, not just schools. And I say that quite pointedly because I know that we were narrow, we got it wrong, but we've heard loud and clear. It's a charitable company with DGR status, so we can get philanthropic funds both for the scholarship fund and for the public fund. Gabby has become a director and member of the Jewish Education Foundation, and the membership base has been expanded to include all participating schools and the Australian Council of Jewish Schools. So, as many of you know, there are about 5,000 children in Jewish schools in Victoria and 4,000 Jewish children in non-Jewish schools. According to the, I think, Gen 17 report, a significant proportion of those in government schools want to be in a Jewish school but feel that fees are a barrier. I think it's about 37%. I could be a little bit off. That's a significant number. There are over 700 vacancies in our Jewish schools, which is a bit of a waste. And filling vacancies is good for Jewish education, obviously, and good for the schools. So this is something that really, which is what the Fee Assessment Board is trying to address, to welcome more Jewish children into the Jewish schools, to help them achieve more capacity, to create larger class sizes, and all the benefits that go with that. So the guiding principles of the Fee Assessment Board, and I know this sounds like motherhood, but it's really important, particularly when you get to difficult discussions about certain things, is that firstly, our communities must strive to make Jewish education an affordable right for every Jewish student. Families should make a fair contribution towards their fees, given their financial situation. The process of determining what a fair contribution is must be confidential, simple, robust, and dignified. No family should be driven into poverty or anything approaching poverty or even relative poverty to pay fees. And all families are entitled to retain some discretionary income and some savings. In other words, sending your child to a Jewish school should not deplete the resources of the family. They're the principles. Now, amazingly, we've got all 6 schools to agree to a single approach, a single model with a single set of rules, so that it doesn't matter which school you'd want to go to, the process would be the same and the fee discount assessed would be the same. I thought that was an incredible achievement and a lot of compromises were made by the schools. And when Gabby started agitating, as she does so well, that we had excluded the rest of the community, I thought, how great would it be? We've achieved so much in bringing the 6 schools together. Imagine if we could also bring the rest of the community into one body focused on Jewish education without separation. If we can get all those, all those 6 schools to agree on a single process and a single fee for anyone in the community who cannot pay full fees, we ought to be able to, as a community, come together, regardless of whether children are in Jewish schools or whether they're being educated in Jewish tradition and religion and whatever else in a government school or in a private non-Jewish school. So it's a new process, but it's not complicated. Firstly, the participating schools have nominated year levels with vacancies. You'll find them on our website. So literally every one of those schools has told us where they've got vacancies that they would accept children who are assessed by the Fee Assessment Board for the fees assessed by the Fee Assessment Board. They would apply to the Fee Assessment Board for an assessment if there's a vacancy in their school of choice. So the parent looks at the list, decides what school they may want to go to. If there's a vacancy in the year level that they're interested in, they would apply to the Fee Assessment Board. The application is online and straightforward. It doesn't require details of personal expenditure. Very importantly, no intrusion into your personal life. Basically, the way the model works is on, if you like, averages and reasonable numbers, OECD determined. We had an economist, a leading economist working with us on it. what does it actually cost? What is the reasonable cost of living for a Jewish family living in Melbourne and southeast Melbourne specifically? The formula applies an estimate of living costs based on averages for Jewish households in Victoria. Very important. There's no prying into your life, into the life of an applicant. It's simply a number, and I'll explain how that works in a minute. And then applicants can include any special circumstances that impact their ability to pay fees, in addition to what the model spits out, because the model spits out a discount, if you like, whether it's 20, 50, 70, whatever the number is, depending on the circumstances of the family and its income. So special circumstances could be a bar mitzvah, a sick relative, a parent, all of those things that we know about that come into everyone's lives. And that's where the Fee Assessment Board will make a decision. Now, importantly, by the time the application goes to the Fee Assessment Board, it's anonymised. So the only people who see the application is the Fee Assessment Board administrator, and that's the name of the person. It's depersonalised. So the Fee Assessment Board simply sees a depersonalised application with a request for special consideration, whatever they might be, and they'll make a determination based on that. So the fees are assessed. This is really important. You'll all be interested in this, I hope. So that it's a sophisticated but non-intrusive formula based on income, assets, liabilities, family size, and housing situation. Not complicated, as simple as we could possibly make it. The application will be anonymised, and the FAB will determine discounts, additional discounts due to special circumstances. The next step is applicants are advised of their fee and decide if they want to proceed. So this is totally anonymised. And if you don't like the discount, you basically throw it in the bin and you move on. So in other words, the discretion is entirely for the parent to make, or the decision. If it's likely a PACE is available, applicants will verify their application and follow the school's normal admission processes. The schools obviously cannot talk about fees, but if someone has to be halachically Jewish in a particular school or whatever, obviously those things would have to be honoured, the school's requirement for a child to go to that school. Once enrolled, the school charges the fees assessed by the Fee Assessment Board. We step out of the picture completely. The fees reassessed each year to reflect change in circumstances, and we've also implemented a limited number of donor scholarships to be allocated. That's because the schools said to us, our budgets cannot afford children coming in for us just to get the government grant. We've got to know that you won't send us children who can't pay as little as 20% of the nominated fee, just from a budgetary point of view. So we decided that we weren't comfortable with that, and we approached a number of foundations to top up the amount to 20%, so that we'll be able to ensure that in every year's allocation of Fee Assessment Board places, we'll be able to have an ability to achieve equity for some families who can't even afford to pay 20%. So I'm very proud of that, very pleased with that, and the Erdi Foundation has offered to do that for at least the period of the pilot, for the 2 years. Although, mind you, I think it's probably said later in the presentation, but any child that gets a place in a school is entitled to stay in that school for the rest of their schooling through to VCE. And that's very important. And that's what the Erdi Foundation has undertaken, that any child that it accepts on the basis of a scholarship, they will fund that child through to VCE. So the pilot will start in 2023. We've got applications open now to, I think, the 31st of July. And we hope to finish the process by October this year for the 23 year. The 24 year will start a little bit earlier. We're running a little bit late, I think, this year. We'll start in about February, March, or April, perhaps at the very latest next year for the 24 year. And as I said, children will be entitled to remain at that school until the completion of their schooling for the annual fee assessed by the Fee Assessment Board, provided all the school's normal terms and conditions for ongoing enrolment are satisfied. So there's the dates: application 17th of June to 31st of July. Assessments will be made by the 31st of August, and we hope that the enrolment process is finished September, October, beginning 2023. And the families and foundations funding this initiative are listed on that page, including, interestingly, the Israeli Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, who are quite excited about this initiative. We'll evaluate the pilot at the completion of the 23 and 24 enrolment intake. We're going to outsource that to make sure it's objective. You know, how many people applied, how did they experience it, how many people decided not to proceed, et cetera, et cetera. And importantly, particularly for this group, is that this is only one initiative, the Jewish Education Foundation. We'll continue exploring other ideas for making Jewish education more accessible and affordable, either in the Jewish schools or not in the Jewish schools. And that is a commitment that has only an intention at this stage, because we're not sure what that means. And we're obviously going to work with Gabby on what does that mean? How do we engage that community? What are the options? What are the possibilities? How can we advance Jewish education more broadly? And I think that's it. So I'm going to stop the share now. And very, very happy to take questions.
Great. Well, Alan, we've already got a few questions. First, just before we jump to the questions, can I say thank you very much for that short and sharp presentation. Can I also, I've noticed our UJEB's Deputy Principal, Dr. Sholem has snuck into this session, and I want to welcome him. He's our Deputy Principal Teaching and Learning. So welcome to Sholem. Alan, the first question, it's sort of come in a couple of different forms, and it's really this: what is meant by vacancies? So it's been phrased differently. Places at schools, does this increase the number of places at schools, or is it the same? So can you explain what it's meant by that?
Vacancies is when you've got a classroom that can accommodate 22 children and there's 15 children in that classroom, you've got 7 vacancies, basically. Now, the school may not want to offer 7 places because in the junior schools, they've got more vacancies than they've got in the senior school. So I'm going to go into the detail because you deserve to understand the dynamics of it. So the schools are concerned that if they bring in too many children on discounts in junior years, in later years where they would have been full anyway, they're going to not get the same amount of income. We've worked our way through that, and we left it to the schools to decide how many places to make available. That's their decision. They feel empowered as a result of that to tell us how many places in how many classes. And, you know, from our point of view, from a school point of view, of course, an empty seat is a wasted seat. And you don't want that. You want to be able to bring in additional income from government grants and whatever a parent can reasonably pay. And that is a really important point. It's what's affordable to a parent. And hopefully our model has captured what that means. And of course, we'll review it at the end of the pilot, but we think we've got it pretty close to being right. We've workshopped it with a whole lot of people, and everyone seems pretty satisfied that it's reasonable, it's fair, et cetera, et cetera.
Thanks for that explanation, Alan. Another question was, in one of the earlier slides, it was stated as pillar 3, the formula applies an estimate of living costs based on averages for Jewish households in Victoria. What is meant by an average for Jewish households in Victoria, and how is that ascertained?
Can I ask Nechama to answer that?
Sorry, Gabby, do you just want to repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. So the third pillar in the how things are determined, it says this: the formula applies an estimate of living costs based on averages for Jewish households in Victoria. And the question that's come in is, what was meant by that? What's the averages for Jewish households in Victoria, and how is that determined?
So it was done by The Economist, and he looked at OECD and ABS data and looked at the cost of living, taking into account things like food, clothing, medical costs. The average cost that you would expect a family in Victoria to spend for their subsistence. And that cost was then inflated to take into account Jewish lifestyle, like kosher food or living in areas where housing is more expensive. And it's also adjusted according to the amount of people living in that household. So the allowance is bigger if the family is bigger, the allowance is smaller if the family is smaller. But it takes into account all the what would be called subsistence costs that a family would incur. Then we allow families to also let us know if they've got a child in childcare, so we take that into account. We also take into account their housing situation, if they're renting or if they've got a mortgage, and then, as Alan explained, any special considerations.
Okay, I'll see if there's any follow-ups to that. The questions are now flying thick and fast.
So can I just
sorry, Alan. Yeah.
So the basic principle goes like this: that you've got income, then you've got, which is actual. We asked you what the income is, what your income is. Then you've got reasonable expenses. So you deduct reasonable expenses from income. Then you get what we call discretionary income. That's the amount of income that's available after the basic cost of living. Then we allocate a percentage of that to school fees, and that means that we leave a percentage of discretionary income for lifestyle beyond, if you like, living costs, for holidays and restaurants and the things that one needs to do. So we don't believe that the discretionary income should all be consumed. It's totally inappropriate. People have got to have a life. So we're taking a percentage of that, and that then is converted to a discount, if you like. And then you choose the school that you want to go to, and you get the discount, for that school.
Okay.
Sorry, can I just add, because I just saw somebody on the chat said that some of the families in government schools might not live in Jewish areas or have the additional Jewish expenses. In that case, the model will just be more generous for them, so they won't be disadvantaged by increasing the allowance for Jewish lifestyle. It just makes the fee lower and makes the subsistence allowance higher, which everybody benefits from, whether they need it or not.
In another way of putting it, if you spend less than the reasonable amount estimated, you're going to be better off, not worse off.
A couple of questions around siblings. I'm going to try and condense them. Is there provision for siblings who aren't yet eligible? What happens if the first child gets in and then the pilot ends and the second child misses out? Park that one, and let's go also with, can a family apply for a discount when one child is already a full fee paying student in a Jewish private school, but the other child's in public school?
Yeah. I think that can I ask Nechama to lead this? Because Nechama's much, it's not that I don't know, but she knows it better. So it's better if Nechama answers these questions.
Sure.
Okay, so the answer is, I'll answer the second question first. Yes, if a full fee paying or a reduced fee paying student is already in a Jewish school, but a sibling's not in a Jewish school, the family can still apply, and the model will take into account the fees that are being paid for the child that's already in a Jewish school. So the model assesses the family, doesn't assess per student. So families that are looking to enrol more than one child, the fee will take into account the total family situation. In terms of ongoing siblings, it's an interesting question. If the pilot doesn't continue, we have guaranteed that any children who enter through the pilot will be supported for the fee assessed by the FAB every year until the child completes their schooling. We haven't contemplated what happens if they want to enrol another sibling at that point, but I would imagine that that child, the sibling, would also be captured as part of the family assessment until the child graduates. So what we're doing is we want to ensure that no one's dislocated. If you come in through the pilot, even if we don't continue, those children will be able to remain at the school till they complete their schooling for the annual fee assessed by the FAB.
So we've got a couple of questions around the schools and the existing systems for financial assistance. So one question has come in this form: are the Jewish schools themselves continuing to offer fee assessments as they have historically while participating in the FAB pilot? If so, is the discount offered expected to be identical whether parents go via the FAB or the schools directly? Leaving aside the process considerations, are parents always going to get a better financial outcome with the fee assessment board? And then I suppose the other question that sort of dovetails is this: does this model replace the existing places? Sorry, no, that's the wrong one. Will you need to? No, sorry, just let's start with that one and I'll see if I can find the other one. Oh no, I found it, sorry. School scholarships, does this replace the existing places at the school? For example, it's noted that King David hasn't offered any secondary school places. That's not really the same question, sorry. It's a completely different question.
These are great questions, by the way. And it's fabulous to get a question of something you hadn't thought of after spending 6 months thinking about it, which is the question of the second child who's not able to come in during the period of the pilot. That's one we've not thought of, thank you. We don't have an answer, but we'll work through that with the individual family, and I'm sure that we could deal with that. There'll be a way of dealing with that. We'll do it on an individual basis. That's why we've done a pilot. That's why we're trying to do a small pilot, because we want to be able to handcraft and we want to learn through the process. It's not going to be easy to work out all the rules, and they'll build up over time. But to answer that question, I'll hand it over to Nechama.
Okay, so Gabby, just can you recap the question, because there were a few there.
So, sorry, the first was around whether the schools are still offering their own fee assessments.
Yeah. Okay, so what we've said is that we, if parents can either apply to the school directly or to the fee assessment board, they can't apply to both in the same year. So parents need to make a decision about whether they go directly to the school. The schools are still offering their normal fee assessment processes. So parents are certainly free to approach the school directly, but if they do that in that same year, they can't approach the FAB and vice versa. So we want to make it, we want to give parents the freedom to choose which approach they'd like, but not have a situation where one system's being played off against the other. In terms of whether the FAB will always deliver a cheaper fee than the schools, we can't say that because each of the schools have their own systems and their own ways of assessing. But what we can say with absolute confidence is that on each and every occasion, the FAB will produce a fee that is affordable to the families, and that will enable them to have leftover discretionary income for non-school fee related expenses. We can say that with absolute confidence, regardless of how many children they bring into the school.
Okay, so there's a couple of questions around whether if you leave the school, if you've been successful in your application to the fee assessment board, whether if once you leave the school, you then have to repay the subsidy to the, I imagine, the Jewish Education Foundation or the school.
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
If you've been successful and you're on a reduced fee at a school and you subsequently decide to leave the school, do you have to repay the subsidy?
No, absolutely not. There's no, the payment of the subsidy is, the payment of the assessed fee is for that year. There's no debt when your child finishes school, and there's no repayment if your child leaves school before completing school. They're free to leave school according to the normal schools processes, which is usually 1 term's notice. No payday.
No. when annual reassessment takes place, how does it work? So you receive, for example, a 30% discount in 2023, but your income goes up or down the following year. How does the discount change? How does that work?
Just according to their current circumstances. So they resubmit the same application form each year, and it's reassessed each year according to their current circumstances. So if their income goes down, their fee discount will go up, and vice versa. But I should say there is also inbuilt increases in the model, which is that the model is cheapest when their children are in primary school. It increases a little bit when they come into high school, and then it increases again when they come into VCE. But all of those stepped increases are disclosed to the parents up front when they first apply. So there's no surprises. It's all very transparent.
There are a couple of comments around, I want to actually save them for a little bit later. Oh no, we'll do it now. It's 8:40. I want to read these to you both. I'm a person in the middle, quote unquote, together with a very large community of people. And we've made the very conscious decision to go to a public primary school because we're not looking for an elite Jewish school. Myself and a number of friends have opted in to participate in focus groups, and none of us was asked to attend. Based on this, how has it been determined that the fee assistance existing model is what we are looking for? And on top of that, in a very funding constrained environment, why is another not-for-profit being established which needs funding to provide fee assistance which already exists in the schools, rather than putting this money into an organisation like UJEB, which is actually offering people who have made a very explicit decision, who don't want fee assistance, a very important service vis-a-vis Jewish education?
Yeah, fair point. I think that is a question of just mutual tolerance. And I completely accept that point of view. John has got to accept the view that not everyone will agree with that view either. So there'll be others who will want to take advantage of this opportunity. And obviously anyone who doesn't want to doesn't have to. That's all I can really say to that. I mean, it's there is the funding to run the fee assessment board is actually very, very light. There is no money required because the money comes from the government grants and the fee paid by the parent that they can afford, whatever that might be. So it's, for the schools, it's just additional income. It's a very, very cost-effective way of creating opportunities for parents of children in government schools who are not in that category, who don't regard the schools, Jewish schools, as being elite, but would like to send their children to a Jewish school but can't afford it and don't feel really comfortable going to the school asking for assistance. With us, they do not get assistance, they get assessment. It's a huge difference. All 6 schools have agreed that this is not assistance. This is an assessment. What they're saying is if we've got vacancies and a family is prepared to go through this process and they're prepared to pay what they can afford to pay, it's their right to come to this school. It's not assistance, it's as of right. I think that's a really, really important point, which is why it was important for me to get all 6 schools to agree. That's just how we do Jewish schools education from now on. If you're willing to pay what you're able to pay, and if there's a vacancy in a Jewish school, it's outrageous that that vacancy should exist if you're prepared to pay that fee and the school is prepared to accept you. There is no assistance in that. There is only an assessment in that.
Had a couple of questions as to whether you can actually walk through like a fictional example of family income and how the model applies. And then I've also had a question, it's a really good one. How would it work in a family where the parents are divorced and both parents have different abilities to pay, but both still require assistance? Will they be assessed separately?
So I'm hoping that Nahama's found the time, because she saw that question come up, because we do have worked examples, and I think that we should be publishing a few of them, Nahama,
Yeah.
so that people can actually get a feeling for what it looks like. Were you able to find those examples in one of your old documents?
Yeah, I can do that. So in terms of what happens if couples are separated or divorced, we collect the financial information from both parents separately. We link the applications and assess them together, so they get a joint assessment, and then we leave it to the parents to decide how they'll divide the payment of that assessment. So if they're assessed, for example, to pay 50% of the fees, we leave it to them to decide which parent, the contribution that each parent will pay towards that 50%. We don't get involved in that. In terms of a typical family, I've got one here. The one I've got here is a couple with 2 children living in the same household. They've got a preschool child and a primary school child. They earn after tax, so this is net, $120,000 a year in income. They've got an allowance for sending their child to kinder. They have a house there. In this case, their house is worth $1.2 million, but they've got an $800,000 mortgage on their home, and that family will receive a 65% discount. I can run through, as many examples as you like, but obviously the discount will depend on the size of the family, whether the income that they have, the assets that they have, and other considerations such as childcare, or if they've got special consideration.
I'm interested.
Thanks, Nahum. Yeah, sorry, go on, Alan.
In Ilana's question. Thank you, Ilana, for that question. It's quite a long one, but I think it's raising a really interesting point. When you say because they don't actually want to accept fee assistance, and no, they won't be eligible as income is slightly too high. This is, Ilana, this is absolutely classic. This is the families that take their children out of Jewish schools after kindergarten, in junior schools, with the intention of putting them back into a Jewish school later. What we're hoping is that, and what they're hoping to be able to do is to go back at full fees. I hope what the Fee Assessment Board can do is not to make the discounted fee look like assistance, because it's not. It's an entitlement. I think that's really, really important. I can't make that point more strongly. We have 6 schools who've agreed that if you go in, you fill out the form, you get a discount, you're prepared to pay that fee, that's your entitlement. I think that's really important, because I hope that will change people's mindsets about the relationship with the school. You don't have to go to the school. You don't have to negotiate with anyone. You simply get a number privately. You make a private decision as to what you want to do. If you want to proceed, that's an entitlement. It's not fee assistance, it's an entitlement. It's how we do Jewish education in Victoria from now on. I think that's a really, really important point. So if you, Ilana, decide to leave your children out till later, and you fear that they won't get in later because of the Fee Assessment Board bringing them in earlier, that's precisely what we want to solve. We want to make it possible for you not to see this as assistance, but as an entitlement now, based on your income now, and you can have your child in a Jewish school if that's what you want to do till VCE. You don't have to keep them out till you saved up enough money or you feel confident paying the full fee or whatever it might be. That's the problem. That's the precise problem I think we're trying to solve. For not everyone, and let me be clear, not everyone, but for those people for whom that is the problem, that's what we're there for.
Alan, questions come in. I'm trying to figure out if it's worth it to apply for both of my children to attend Jewish schools, although one is a bit younger, both are in primary school. Would the assistance level be different if I was only asking about one child rather than both?
I'll let Nechama, please.
Yeah, yes, it will be cheaper for one rather than two. Parents, if they want to know what the fee will be if they put in one child or if they put in two children, are welcome to ask us and we'll let them know what the fee will be in both circumstances. Generally speaking, the fee will be higher if you enrol more than one child, but it'll max out. So it'll come to a point, because we will always guarantee that the fee will be affordable and that you'll retain some discretionary income. There'll come a point where the fee will be the same regardless of how many children you enrolled. But on the face of it, if you enroll one child, it will be cheaper than if you enroll two. But it may not be cheaper to enroll two children than three, for example, or three children than four.
And it's also that if one child is affordable, two children is probably affordable as well, because it's actually structured so that two children should also be affordable, and so should three, because the level, if you like, of discount increases with more children, because we recognise the fact that people have to retain a certain proportion of their discretionary income to live a life. You can't just pay all your discretionary income in school fees.
Yeah, so obviously the fee won't double if you bring in two children.
Unless some other variable changes, like income goes up
in
a subsequent year. How are you going with applications and inquiries? That's been a question.
We've been a lot of inquiries and a few applications. I think
early days.
People are, yeah.
Growing. While we've been on the Zoom, we've had more come in. So
we expected to be a slow burn initially until people get used to it, start talking to each other, understand it, contact us, maybe put in an application, see what it comes back with, think about it. And that's what we're encouraging everyone on this call to do. There's nothing to be lost. The application is confidential. It gives you a number. You can choose to ignore that number. You can choose to take that number and proceed and then go to a school of your choice. It's up to you. We've tried to make it as sensitive and as non-intrusive as possible. We encourage everyone just who's interested, who has an interest in it, to fill the application form in, and we'll contact you. We'll give you a number. You can make your own decision.
So there's a bit of concern, and Alan, you might have another go at answering this. It may be in another way. There is concern about, and there are a number of UJEB parents who have made the decision to be full fee paying parents for a period of time, but not the whole of the 13 years of what would otherwise be a child's education. And I'm seeing concern expressed that they are going to miss out on spots in secondary school in favour of people who have been assessed by the Fair Assessment Board who have then taken vacancies. Does that hold true?
Yeah, I hope I don't upset anyone by saying this, because that's our hope, is that instead of a parent deciding to pay full fees for a small number of years, we want them to pay what they can afford to pay for all years, if that's what they want. That's really important, because that's what's happening at the moment. Because parents feel uncomfortable asking for a discount or fee assistance, and I understand that, they decide that they're either going to be in a government school or they're going to pay full fees. What we're trying to do is to say there's a third approach, and all 6 schools have agreed to it, that if you pay a reasonable fee all the way through, you should be able to have your child, if you want to, in a Jewish school all the way through, not paying full fees, but not feeling that you've received assistance, but feeling that you've received your entitlement. Because if you pay what you can afford, and if the school's got a vacancy, That's the end of the matter as far as we're concerned. I know it's a mental shift. It's a really important mental shift. We want to make that mental shift in the community, that if we've got vacancies in the Jewish schools and we've got parents prepared to pay what they can reasonably afford, we should marry those. We shouldn't create a situation where a family feels, I only want to pay a full fee because I don't want to go through that process of asking for assistance. So I'm going to have my children in a government school for X years and then I'll save up or whatever it is, you know, whatever it might be in your particular circumstances, then I'll pay full fees. I think that's the mindset that has to be broken. And we got all 6 schools to agree to that. Really important.
I think one of the concerns is that's what the schools have agreed, and that's the model that, you know, the Jewish Education Foundation has decided it wants some UJEB parents to adopt. I think what I'm hearing from some of the comments is, what about having some respect for the decisions that we've made, because we want to be full fee paying for 6 years, and we don't want our thinking to be broken, as it were, and for us to be reprogrammed. We want to have some respect for the way we've chosen to do things. And so will we still get spots in secondary school going on the way we want to do it, for the way we want to educate our kids, is what I'm hearing loud and clear.
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying, and I'm constantly surprised about, you know, our inability to think through everything, but I accept that point. I understand what that person is saying, and let me reflect on it.
And could I just add, the schools have withheld spots for full fee payers. They haven't given us every vacancy available to them. They're very conscious of the fact that parents do come in at a later date paying full fees, and in the places they've given to us, they've held back spots for that exact purpose.
Thanks, Nechama and Alan. A couple more questions, and then more, I suppose, into the nitty-gritty. What happens if there are 2 children, but only one of them is in a year level with available spaces at the preferred school? Then do you have to separate siblings? Park that one, if you can remember that one. I'm going to ask this as well. If, say, Bialik has 2 places in year 8 available, and there are 10 people who've decided to proceed because the fee assessment is acceptable to them, will there be transparency around that? It's not necessarily a FAB issue, it might be a school issue, but how does it work?
That's 2 separate questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
So that's fine.
I should jam them all in.
Let me repeat the first question, is that there are 2 children, but only one of them in a year level with available spaces in the preferred school. We'll talk to the school. We'll talk to the school and say, we'd want to keep this family together. Could you make a spot available in year 3, although you have not listed it? And I think that we can't guarantee what the outcome would be, but I think you could be reasonably hopeful that it would be okay. The second question was more difficult.
Bialik's got 2 places available in year 8, and 10 people have decided to proceed because the fee assessment's acceptable to them. Will there be transparency around that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't have an answer to that. We don't have a policy for that. That's why we've run a pilot. We really just don't know. We'll have to, we will let people know how we've made the decision, but I don't know exactly how we're going to make the decision yet. We're going to try to do it as fairly as we can. As you can see from our quest to get scholarships, we want to make sure that there's as much equity in the system as we possibly can. We are not going to prioritise the highest fees. We're going to have a mix for a start. We're going to make sure that it's a balanced group, some getting higher discounts, some getting lower discounts. And we hope also to have some who are below the 20% threshold who get scholarships. So we'll try to be fair, we'll try to be equitable, but the reason we decided to do a pilot is because there were just so many things to work out. That was one that we didn't feel that we could come up with a comprehensive policy on, because it's just, you know, we spent a lot of time discussing it, but we just could not come to a clear view on that. We'll be
The project-
transparent.
Okay. Did the project look at ways to reduce fees overall for all fee payers?
Well, for Jewish schools, you know, if there were mergers, the fees would come down, but no one wants them, right? If you had a single VCE school, the fees would come down, but everyone worries about what will happen to the junior schools. So the answer is yes, we looked at a lot of things, and this was the best thing that we could come up with, that we could get pretty broad acceptance that it was a win-win-win, although not everybody wins. That's never possible.
Couple of questions around people who are already in the Jewish schools. Can they apply for the fee assessment, given that they may have various reasons for not having approached their respective schools to date?
The answer is no, not in the pilot period.
Okay. What input does the school have in accepting a child, like reviewing reports and interviews and assessments like that?
What you do is you simply put the fee to the side. That's not a conversation. We're not experts on how the schools do admissions. They've got their own processes, but what they're not allowed to do is to ask for more or less than the fee assessed by the fee assessment board, and they've agreed to that.
An excellent question. I mean, they're all excellent questions, but this is one I know that has exercised your mind a little bit, Alan. So I know you've thought about this one. Prep. Kinder parents who are tossing up at the moment whether to test their hand at a government school, step outside, for example, for the first time, perhaps step outside the Jewish schooling system. They've been at a Jewish ELC or whatever, and they're deciding, do they go to a Jewish school via this route, or do they go to a government school and, say, avail themselves of the amazing opportunities that UJEB offers? When weighing all of that up, what are kinder parents to do, because prep doesn't seem to be an option?
That's a really great question. Nechama, can I be a coward and hand that to you?
Yeah, it's exactly as Gabby said. It's a question that we've thought about a lot. We've decided not to include preps for the first year of the pilot, though we're going to revisit that and consider whether we do or not for the 2024 intake, which will take place in early 2023. The key reason we've not included prep at this stage is because, well, first of all, that's the big intake year for the schools. So that's when they could be bringing in, 60, 80, 100, 120 kids. So we didn't want to be competing with their existing processes and bursaries and other fee assistance processes that they have for their prep intake, though we don't consider ours to be fee assistance. We just thought it would be too confusing for the parents. They won't know, do I go to the school or do I come to the fab? Who do I go to and how does it all work? So it's something that we need to give further thought to and that we've committed to do before the 2024 intake, not preempting what the outcome will be. But for this pilot, it was just too complicated, and we thought that we would start with the years 1 to 12 because they were far simpler for us to deal with.
I'll swing in behind that and say that if what Nechama has just said leads you ultimately to conclude that you are going to send your child to a government school, please get in touch with UJEB. We are here. Which dovetails beautifully to John's most recent comment, which is, would be great to see the community providing lots of support to UJEB to get kids ready to transition to Jewish schools when, I'll qualify that by saying if, parents have decided they can afford to make the move. It's really important that we remember that not everyone transitions from a government school to a private Jewish school, but for those who do, his point is, why can't the community really come behind UJEB to strengthen it to serve effectively as a feeder school?
I
Alan,
agree.
what's your view on that?
Completely agree. Nothing to add other than agree wholeheartedly with that.
I'll just say to John, whoever you are, I'm going to find you and I'm going to ask you to volunteer for one of the many voluntary positions that UJEB I don't know if I've covered all the questions. Please message Oran or me directly, or the wider group. If I've missed something, I apologise. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Looks like we've sort of cut. No, here's one more. Assets. How nuanced is the model in terms of homes in trust? Is the algorithm based on equity in the home? Also, what kind of diligence will the fee assessment board be doing? Will the board check with the ATO or tax agents, for instance, or purely rely on parents' honesty? It's a good question.
Yeah. Nechama?
Thanks, Alan. So first of all, we won't be asking for any verification of your information unless you've accepted the fee and we're able to offer you a place. So that way we're not asking parents to verify unnecessarily. If you've accepted the fee and we're able to offer you a place, we'll ask you to complete a stat dec saying that the information in your application form is true and correct. And then on a case-by-case basis, depending on the application, we may or may not ask for additional supporting documentation, which might include, copies of your tax returns or trust deeds or mortgage statements, things like that, or council valuations on your home. So that will be determined on a case-by-case basis, depending on the complexity of the application. In terms of how we deal with assets, yes, we do look at net assets. Though if the gross assets exceed a threshold, then the application won't be assessed, won't be valid for assessment, but that's a really high threshold. And the way we look at assets is that the first $1 million of assets that people have are there's no requirement for any contribution from that first $1 million in net assets. But if families have net assets exceeding $1 million, then there'll be a very small contribution towards fees from those assets above that $1 million threshold.
There's one question. I'm not sure if I understand this, but Nechama or Alan, if you do, go for it. How is intergenerational wealth or lack of it taken into account?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's grandparents. In the pilot period, we're not going to pay a lot of attention to that, and we'll just see how it goes.
So there is a question in the application form that says, do you receive any assistance from family or friends? And if you do, that will go towards your net income.
Now I understand the question. Thank you. Okay, good friends. Anyone else? Calling. Feel like Gary Peer. I feel like Kingston right now. Can I just say, all I covered to everyone for your frank and fearless questions, for your passion and your incredible intelligence. Hats off to each of you and respect. To Alan and Nechama, thank you so much. You are doing this for naught, and Alan, you're working very, very hard. Alan is doing this off his own bat, and Nechama is doing this with a lot of good grace and working very, very, very hard to try and open pathways for those families who are interested in going down this pathway. As Alan said, this is one initiative. It's the first initiative. And you can rest assured that there will, I won't stop till there are more. And we've gotten really good feedback tonight, and we will keep giving voice to those suggestions. Thank you, everyone. Alan, Nechama, thank you. And I'm going to bid you all a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, Gabby. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Alan.
Bye-bye.
Bye.